Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Maggie. Ever since Maggie starts out with a speed upgrade with the speed up pill, she's so much more enjoyable to play as. I really can't tell you how much of a difference it makes. And I think the biggest reason why Maggie felt sluggish as opposed to someone like Lilith or the Keeper, which are also both quite slow characters, is that Maggie is a very uninteractive character. With the Keeper, you have your active item, the coin. Basically, you walk into a room, you kind of have to use it, and then you have to kind of keep attention of where that coin is, so if you do get hit, you can go back and kind of pick it up, so the minions won't block you, the enemies, not the minions. And opposed to that, you also have your triple shot, which is just makes things just a bit more dynamic. Of course, with Lilith, you have your incubus, so you kind of have to stay focused on how you're gonna shoot with that. You kind of have to think about how you're gonna move and how incubus is gonna move relative to your position, and that kind of keeps you busy, so you don't really notice that speed downgrade or maybe the fact that those characters are slow. But because Maggie was just a base character with base tiers, with base damage, she really felt like playing Isaac, just slower, and for that reason, she felt sluggish. And it, like I said before, it makes such a huge difference, just the fact that you start out with just a simple speed upgrade. I was debating with myself whether maybe she should just start out with 1 speed instead of having a pill which puts you to 1 speed, and I think starting out with a pill is just better in all cases. Maybe there's another balance change to be done there. Maybe she could start with 1 speed and then just get a random pill upgrade or something like that. But I think that way, the fact that she starts with a pill just gives you more dynamic options later down the road. Because you can get placebo, for example, you can use that multiple times. Or even there's a pill which uses or spawns the last pill you just used, which means you can essentially use it twice and then you're in a very comfortable position from that point on. And I think overall, you know, the inclusion of that just makes her such a more enjoyable character. Because if you think about it, it didn't really make sense that she was penalized, at least from a balance perspective. I know, not all characters are balanced, they're not really meant to be balanced in the sense, but because you are playing like Isaac, you have 1 more health, you have Yum Heart, but then again, you know, Isaac has the D6, and the D6 is arguably one of the best items in the game, and I would say that the D6 is worth maybe like 1 red heart, and for that reason I feel like Maggie should still have the base speed that Isaac has, just because it makes her more consistent with the others. I don't really like when these stats change from the defaults, so for example like shot speed or maybe even speed in general. It just makes things feel weird, and you're not accustomed to it, and maybe I guess that's the reason why I'm glad that this change did, or that this inclusion of the speed upgrade pill did happen, and it's a really nice change. Besides that, this run has been going quite poorly so far. You can see that we're at the 13th minute on the Caves 1, I believe, the round caves, the dank caves, something like that. And it's not looking well. We had a few nasty boss fights, and it was just an uncomfortable position all around. But thankfully, this chest teleported us to the boss, to the Devil Deal, and the Devil Deal contains some really great items. Obviously, Little Brimstone is amazing, just because it does allow you, just gives you a more offensive punch. You can just deal with enemies much easier. And the other one is the shovel, because this run only goes to Mom. We need a way to go forward, and usually you would be satisfied with maybe an AWAS room or maybe a sacrifice room, but with the shovel we can essentially do 3 more floors, and that's just a huge amount of points. I think just based off of that I can essentially triple my points just by visiting the dark room, not the dark room but the shoal, and if there's a sacrifice room there, then I can go to the dark room as well. Little Brimstone is just a great familiar overall, you know. I think Little Brimstone has to stand in for the best familiar in the game, and the more I actually use him and the more I see him, the more convinced I am that that's true, just because he saves your bad runs so well. What really makes him great is that you can charge up the shot before you enter the room, which means that essentially you have 1 full Brimstone shot as soon as you enter the room, and you can just melt enemies. So sure, there are some enemies which are maybe invincible at the start, but there's no reason you can't wait, and then when you shoot them you can essentially clear multiple enemies at once. And when you actually reduce the enemies by even, let's say that the room has 5 enemies, even if you kill 1 of them, it makes dodging so much easier. It just opens a pathway to you where you can actually move, and it just saves your run in such a way that I don't think a lot of other items do. And I like Little Brimstone from the design perspective, because he's not gonna make your strong run stronger. So for example, if you had something like Brimstone, you know that it's a pretty much a 1 run. But Little Brimstone, you can't really say that. He's still, you know, a familiar, he still follows you around, it's still quite hard to aim with him, and his damage, while it's great early on, it kind of falls off later. And kind of combine all of that, it makes him a real good item if you're behind, but if you're ahead, it's not really anything spectacular. He's just there to maybe add just a little bit extra bit of damage. But you can see that I went crazy with at least with the familiars here. But besides having Little Brimstone, I decided to pick up Bob's Brain, and that's an item that I usually wouldn't really pick up. But Bob's Brain, in my opinion, when you have a combination of items that work well, for example, like with set bombs, I think there's an argument to pick it up. If you're careful, it's gonna hit you. You know, like whenever you pick up Bob's Brain, you might say to yourself, "It's not gonna hit me on this run." It will hit you on this run. You kind of have to internalize that at least once you're gonna get hit by Bob's Brain, because it's gonna respawn in a position, or maybe it's gonna respawn when you least expect it, and when it does, it's gonna explode in your face and you're gonna take damage. But I'm okay with that, you know, because I'm a player who generally takes a lot of damage, I think, against enemies and just against bosses in general. Having another way to damage myself is not that bad. I never really feel bad for taking damage from Bob's Brain, because I know for one bit of damage that it does, it probably saved me like 10 rooms in consequence. Maybe I could say that in the other way around. So for every bit of damage, for every room that it saves me, it also gives me damage. Or maybe for every 10 rooms that it saves me, it also gives me some damage. So in that sense, I feel like it's balanced, because it does save you more often than it does actually damage you. And I think that also depends on just the rooms you get, but you know, on the average case, I'm just talking about the average case here, it's gonna be more beneficial for you to actually pick it up than to actually skip it. And that's only if you have a weak run. If you have a strong run, I would usually never advise it, because if you can already clear rooms without the help of Bob's Brain, there's no reason to pick up Bob's Brain, because it's just gonna damage you. But because this run is weak, that's why I decided to pick it up. And again, that was maybe a bit long-winded, because I was trying to make a point that Bob's Brain is not that bad of an item if you're behind, and it is bad if you're ahead. But you know, let's just keep it at that. I don't want to really talk about Bob's Brain anymore. Here we have a very interesting decision, or maybe we kind of have to keep in mind when we are playing the dailies on when should we stop using the shovel or maybe go to the sacrifice room. Because here's the thing, when you go to the sacrifice room, it's always better to go to the sacrifice room than to go one additional floor with a shovel, because getting to the dark room is going to give you more points, beating the lamp is going to give you more points, and there's really no reason not to do it. But now we have kind of 3 opportunities to actually get to the dark room. We can go to the dark room in the Womb 1, Womb 2, or the Shoal. And of course, we don't really know on which floor the sacrifice room will spawn. Thankfully, it didn't spawn on the Womb 1, and that made things just a bit easier. And it did spawn on the Womb 2. Now it's a decision. Should we actually do the sacrifice room on this particular floor, or should we go to the dark room or to Shoal and then hope that there is a sacrifice room there? And if it isn't, you know, we still get a lot of points just by going to Shoal and actually beating that floor. I think in an average case scenario, it's always better to go via the sacrifice room. Unless you have some prior knowledge on if there is gonna be a sacrifice room in Shoal, you should never take that risk and hope that it's gonna be there. You should always kind of stick to your guts and stay in this position and just go from the Womb 2 if this situation arises. I would argue that on the Womb 1, the sacrifice room isn't worth it, because you essentially have 2 more chances. And I would say that is kind of amended by how many keys you have. Not a lot of people know this, but if I believe you have 3 or less keys, there's a chance that if a double key room spawns, or a dice room, I think it's a dice room, I'm not sure, but essentially a double key room, if it spawns, if you have less than 3 keys, that double key room is gonna be a sacrifice room. So I would argue if you have 3 floors remaining, and if you have less than 3 keys, you shouldn't take the sacrifice room on the Womb 1, because you essentially have 2 more floors or 2 more chances to get it. But if it does appear on the Womb 2, then you should take it, because on average it's gonna give you more points, because you can never really guarantee that it's gonna be there on the Womb, not the Womb 3, but the Shoal. And maybe that's a bit convoluted, but I hope it makes sense. And I haven't tested this with math or anything, this is just my hunch, I guess, and this is how I play the game. And so far it seems to work out well, but then again, if it's maybe always better to go to the dark room, please let me know, because I think it's a balancing act, and I think there definitely needs to be some math behind it that I have to do to be a bit more sure. But for the time being, you know, just if you stick with that, I can promise that you'll have a relatively good result. Overall, this run, like I said, was pretty weak. Thankfully, the inclusion of all the good familiars here, the BBF, the Brimstone, the Little Brimstone, the Little Chest, Bobs, they have helped us a lot, Bob's Rain even, just all of these familiars together kind of carried the run, and I'm really glad that I actually got them. There was something unfortunate that happened in this daily, and like always, I read the threads after I'm done with the daily, and I see how other people actually did. And I noticed that on the 3rd floor, there was a reroll machine, and if you rerolled it 3 times, you got attack X, or maybe 2 times. And I didn't see the reroll machine, and if you go back, you'll notice that it's a double room. And the reason for that is because I had 11 cents, I believe, on the second floor, and I decided to visit the shop, and in there's options, and that is basically a room, not a room, an item, which makes all treasure rooms double treasure rooms, so you're gonna have 2 items to choose from. And when that happens, you obviously can get a single room which has a reroll machine in it, and for that reason, it's unfortunate. You know, it's unfortunate because I made the right play in that sense, because you would always rather have 2 items to choose from than 1, but just in this one particular daily, if you didn't pick up those options, there was a tech X hidden somewhere, and obviously with tech X we would be able to actually get to boss rush, we would just get more points in general because we would get hit less, and we would just complete the whole game faster. Our item penalty will also be lower, our Shrek bonus would probably be higher. Overall, you'll know just getting 1 good item has a lot of consequences on this run. And remember how I said in the previous daily, it's important that you kind of go for those major objectives if you maybe have an unlucky run, which I would consider this run to be a bit unlucky, is to kind of get those important objectives to close the gap. And definitely in this position, the most important objective was the stage bonus and the exploration bonus. The stage bonus, as you can see, gave us basically 2/3 of our points, and that is something that no one can take away from us. Even the best players who might have gotten less damage penalty or maybe gotten Shrek bonus, higher Shrek bonus, our stage bonus is still relatively the highest thing that we could have gotten on this run, and we're not doing that poorly, with the end ranked about top 50. With that said, you know, it was still a weak run. Obviously, it wasn't the best run I ever had in my life, but I am satisfied with it and how it turned out. I'm really glad that I can actually perform well, even though I know that some people do look up on the threads what's going on, or maybe which items to reroll to get a good item. I don't tend to do that, as is probably noticeable by how I play in the videos, but I'm still glad that I do manage to rank quite well in some of these dailies at least. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.